Hello and welcome to Behind the Bearcat. This is the podcast where the Northwest Missouri State University Career Services Office chats with Northwest faculty, staff, students, alumni, and friends to hear about their career journeys, how they got to where they are, and how they became Bearcats. I'm Career Services Assistant Director Travis Klein.
And I'm Hannah Christian, the Director of Career Services here at Northwest. And today's guest on our show, my little drum roll.
At Northwest Missouri State. Been here since 2002.
Welcome.
It's only taken you 23 years to get on our podcast.
I know. Okay. I'm glad to be here, though. Thanks for having me.
All right, awesome. So we'll just start with, tell me, what does a professor of political science do? We've had a couple of other folks on the show, but we'd just love to hear your background and tell us what you teach.
Well, as far as the teaching, I'm actually in the area of international relations, and in particular, I like to work with our Northwest Emergency and Disaster Management program. They have an international humanitarian crisis response emphasis folded within that, and then within political science, there's a global affairs emphasis folded within that. So really, what I try to do is just take your Northwest student who maybe hasn't thought about leaving the United States and convincing them that the skills that they get here at Northwest can transfer globally in some instances. It's just a matter of putting that thought in their head and giving them the confidence to build on the education they're getting here. So that's kind of what I do academically. Talk
that's
about
awesome.
the larger outside world, try to bring it into the classrooms that I'm in, and then send people out of those classrooms back into that great big world that's out there.
How did you get to Northwest? Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, well, trajectory-wise, I am a first-generation college student. So I did that. I grew up in a small town in eastern Kansas, and then I went to Kansas State University. I studied abroad when I was at Kansas State and went to East Africa for a year. And then that's what gave me the confidence to start thinking about going into other cultures, living in them for an extended period.
Okay, hold on. I gotta interrupt.
Yeah.
First question, what town in East Kansas?
So Paxico, Kansas
Okay, all right.
it's west of Topeka, 30 minutes, 30 miles or so. I don't know, 200 and some people in it. It's
All
pretty
right. So see, this is what I want to get to. Like, if you're someone from a town of 200 people, you too can go to East Africa, right? Like, this is like so relatable to so many people around here.
Well, so that is what the fulfillment of being at Northwest is I can see myself in so many of our students in that, small town, first generation, quite often, all those things. But I had lots of people that helped me along the way. And so that I want to be paying it forward in that regard. And
I love that.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that was my first question. My second question is normally, so was it an exchange program? Because normally if you're studying abroad, it's not usually for an entire year, right?
Well, it can be. And so
Okay.
this is the beauty of it. So let me, I've never been out of the US before. And my whole reason for going to college was like, can I find a way to travel the world on somebody else's money? Was the idea. And so my thought was I'd do foreign service. I'd do something like in the diplomatic corps or something like that. But I've always wanted to get to Africa. Somebody on this Kansas State University campus said, we have a study abroad office where you walk in there, you can go to lots of different places. Whatever classes you take there would transfer back. So you wouldn't lose any time in terms of getting through your degree. And you'd get this great experience and maybe make it more marketable. All right. So if I file that away, 20-year-old Brian Hesse, and that experience leads me to applying for some scholarships. That scholarship that I get from the British government is called the Marshall Scholarship, which allows me to go to London for 3 years to get my doctorate. It was a fast track program that I was on through the Marshall Scholarship program. So I lived in London, and so I got that urban experience that I wasn't getting in Paxico, Kansas, living in one of the world's great cities. Great experience there. And when I left London, then for a number of years, I was doing guiding in East Africa. So I've always been an ecologist at heart. and I wanted to kind of do the naturalist thing, and so photographic safaris is what I was doing in East Africa and Southern Africa mostly. And then when my the prospect of getting married came along, my spouse told me that I had a great lifestyle. I didn't really have a very good career, right? So she was like, "You need to bring a little bit more to the equation in terms of income and insurance and all sorts of things." So I applied for lots of places, and Northwest took a shot on me, gave me an interview, and applied and all that, and that was 2002. So as far as like coming here again, that appeal is I see myself in a lot of these students. I see our study abroad office, which is located on campus, offering those kinds of opportunities that open my eyes to the world. So I tell all my classes, you need to walk into our library, go past the Starbucks, go past the circulation desk, turn right, and that'll take you into an office that you can go to almost any country on the planet and study for a semester or a year. And then we have all of our faculty-led opportunities also, which would be 2, 3 weeks, something like that, if you don't want to commit to a longer time frame. And then I always make the case, like in some instances, it was actually cheaper for me to do the study abroad for a year because the exchange rate for the U.S. dollar to the Tanzanian shilling, my rent was less, and my dollar went farther, and I actually was able to stretch it. So it financially it didn't set me back, but in terms of academics and opportunities, it just opened up the world to me. So I'm a big advocate of our study abroad opportunities at Northwest as well. And
Can
um
you,
and um
yeah, can
and
you explain? We haven't really talked about this in terms of like exchange programs, but can you explain kind of the way that they pay tuition,
yeah,
the
yeah.
tuition
So
exchange process?
there's a number of ways to do it through Northwest. You could do a direct application, which basically Northwest then just kind of placeholds you, and then you go to that other institution, and when you come back, you tell Northwest, I'd like to transfer back these credit hours in these classes. That's the exception. The rule tends to be on your enrollment, it'll say 15 credit hours, 12 credit hours, 18 credit hours, study abroad. And you've worked out with your professors on campus here at Northwest. In lieu of taking your class, I'll be taking a similar class over in insert country, and it transfers back. And your GPA, your scholarships, your GPA, everything it's just like you're going to Northwest administratively, but you're doing it over there. So you just pay your local tuition and fees, you apply your scholarships or loans or whatever. It's just that you're doing it somewhere else. Um, the One of the concerns I hear from people is like, well, I don't speak a foreign language. English is my first and only language, and uh, we're lucky enough, I guess, in some sense, in that English is the international language of opportunity. So I tell them, you can go to Argentina, you can go to Morocco, you can go to South Korea, all as examples of places my advisees have gone. And you go to an English language school. So you're taking your political science classes, your theater classes, your biology classes, whatever classes, you're taking them all in English, but you're living in an environment where you get exposed to these other languages. So, one of my advisees went to Morocco, doesn't speak Arabic, but was taking her English language classes, and outside of class was learning all sorts of Arabic. And on top of that, where her school was, the Atlas Mountains were just outside of the university town, so she could go ski the Atlas Mountains as part of her. She'd go to class in the morning. By the afternoon, she'd be shredding it on the mountain, learning Arabic as she did it. So she got to ski Africa, learn Arabic, and transferred all these classes back for her degree. And so that's the kind of stuff that you can do. I know in South Korea, you could go there in some instances, get paid to go to South Korea. So having a native English speaker, you volunteer at a local school, you get a stipend, but it kind of offsets the cost that you would have had otherwise for that program. So it's kind of a trade. You just get to talk your language and your funny accent to a non-English speaking kid, and they get exposed to English that way.
What was it about Africa? So, I mean, the study abroad, I definitely, we've worked with a lot of students who've done study abroad. I don't know that I've ever worked with a student that went to Africa, though. I think that they're more comfortable with like the idea of a London or or Australia or somewhere where, you know, they kind of know the culture. I think a lot of times students are afraid of the unknown, and I think unfortunately in the U.S. education system we don't learn a lot about Africa. So, what was it for you that kind of made you want to visit Africa and then go back to it and continue to work with it?
Well, so you remember the wildlife thing that I was always, since I was a tiny kid, I've always just been fascinated with the large megafauna that you can find in Africa. So I always wanted to get there, and I really thought if I went the diplomatic corps, foreign service, I'd lose my shot to experience that. So I just kind of rolled the dice, and when I walked into that study abroad office, I just said I just want to get to Africa, and I was kind of ignorant, like you're saying, ignorant not in a bad way, just ignorant not knowing. And they're like, where in Africa? And I'm like, I don't know, isn't it all kind of the same? In that level of, and they're like, oh, we have this exchange in Tanzania, and so when I went, it was the animal. So I was like, Tanzania, ooh, the Serengeti, oh, I've heard of that. Ooh, the wildebeest migration, oh, I've heard of that. I've seen all that on National Geographic. Oh, Simba, oh, that's a Swahili word for lion. Oh, yeah, yeah, the Lion King. There's all that
Mhm.
stuff. So I was like, sure, I'll go to Tanzania, but that was the initial appeal. As far as the comfort levels with students, I say maybe it's a developing world generally. You kind of think I hesitate to go to Peru because I hear that it's a poorer country relative to maybe the U.S. Or I hesitate to go anywhere in Africa because it's a poorer continent relative to the North American continent. Um, and that's the value of traveling the world, seeing how people have to live uh, or how people do live. It's like I didn't choose to be born into the United States in Eastern Kansas. Everyone I know didn't choose to be where they were born at. So it's really important to get out to experience how people live, either by choice or by circumstance. So you got to push your comfort zone. But none of these study abroad programs are going to send you into harm's way.
Right.
That's a big thing is if you're not uncomfortable at some point, no matter where you're at, you're probably not growing and learning. But you definitely don't need to be beyond what's reasonably associated with traveling anywhere. You're not going to be put in that kind of situation. So,
I would like to share my most uncomfortable time in Africa. So I went to Morocco in 2023, right?
how
So
about
as you're
that?
saying, yeah. And
Yeah,
we actually we've had several African student employees here. Actually, a
Mhm.
high percentage of our student employees have been from Africa, and a current student employee from Morocco. And so I was in Marrakesh
is it
for
Yusra?
a
Is it
week.
Yusra? Yusra?
No, it's Sammy.
Okay. Yep.
And
Who I've met.
yep. And so actually the most terrifying experience I had is we had like a charter bus that was taking us out to, we had various art galleries and museums and social events that we were going to. And in Marrakesh, they're like roundabouts, but they're like huge, right? They're like roundabouts with no lanes, and they're like 6 lanes of traffic wide. And there would be 14 people on motorcycles. There'd be two or three horse and buggies. There are like 40 cars and like six of these giant buses. And they're all going around the roundabout, right? And I'm like looking out the window of the bus and I'm like, someone is going to die. And that is the most discomfort. Like the motorcycle guy, like I could reach out and like touch his helmet. He's like inches from the bus, right? And everybody's just kind of, because there's no lights or anything. It's just like kind of free for all. Everybody gets on and off the roundabout or whatever. And I had a few moments of like, I don't know how people survive this traffic situation. And that was literally the most scared that I was in Morocco. Like just watching the horses and the buses and the motorcycles navigate those giant situations, which I imagine in India or any other place where you have just so many different types of transportation going different speeds in the same place. Like that is a sight. That is a sight for anyone to behold. But otherwise, like Africa was an amazing experience for me as well as a white woman from a similar sized town in Midwestern United States. So
Yeah.
highly recommend.
And so not even, and you bring up a good point. You're talking about our students that we have on this campus. So that's the other side of it too. I say you don't even have to leave the U.S. to get exposed to the world. There's people sitting in this room right now I mean, we all have got stories, but isn't that a great story? Like if you're talking to Sami or something
Yeah,
and being like, like, hey, man, I drove to campus today and oh my gosh, the potholes in Maryville. Oh, let me tell you about the potholes in Marrakesh, or let me tell you about the potholes in Dar es Salaam, or so there's a lot of value in that exchange too. And you don't even have to leave. You can just be open to other people in the room or on campus.
exactly. Yeah.
So
What else you
one,
got, Travis?
I was just so you mentioned, you encourage students to go to that study abroad office and talk about that. Do you do any of the faculty-led stuff where you take students to different places? Have you had a chance to do that in your many years here at Northwest?
I've done one faculty-led student trip, but I'm such an advocate of going longer than the 2 or 3 weeks. And so I feel like I personally, not to take away from anyone else on campus and realizing that some students can only swing 2 or 3 weeks for whatever reason. No, I tend to be like you need to go and think about a semester or a year exchange if at all possible, just because the longer you're there, the more opportunity for growth. And
Confidence level, I think, too, right?
well, yeah, you come back. You, if you've managed in a different culture and country for an extended period, I think that does bolster your confidence in all sorts of ways and changes your perspective, obviously.
Yeah.
Um,
So, we kind of talk about this in terms of we couch it in terms of like your career path. How can a student, maybe, especially maybe a first generation student, leverage that into some sort of career opportunity? I like your creative, your own personal creative thoughts. Like, I'm going to go do some diplomatic things, but what are some other options for students?
Well, so the thing that I often tell my advisees or students is I'm a big believer in the proximity principle as well. So if I can convince them that you will be able to survive, if not thrive, leaving this country and let's say studying abroad, it's like, where would you want to go and why? So you put yourself in that area and you get exposed to maybe the job and career opportunities that are there. Or if you already are on a career track, you can see what it would look like to apply in that context. So as an example, so I went to Tanzania thinking foreign service, and when I would see the U.S. embassy officials in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, or the consulate officials, like I could see when they'd have functions for American citizens that happen to be in the country, I'd go and I could kind of see what was going on there. I'd be like, oh, that's different than what I expected, or that's exactly what I expected. In my case, it changed my trajectory away from the foreign service because I didn't feel like I would be fulfilled. I'd be kind of cocooned away from your average person and more doing the diplomatic stuff. Well, that has to happen. There's a necessity to that, but it's not necessarily what I realized that's not what would have been fulfilling for me. So that proximity to that job in that context really gave me insight. So it works the other way. These students that I've had too, sometimes they'll have their degree and they'll be like, I now have the confidence to travel. I don't have the job or career that I want, but I'm willing to take a job in that area or place that allows me to step to the next thing. And that's happened so many times. Um, so you don't have to have everything mapped out, when you graduate, but that's one of the ways to figure out what the next thing would be. Just put yourself in proximity to where you want to be, and you'll find what you want to do, perhaps, or create your what from
I
being
didn't
there.
even think about this until just now, but also if you grow up sometimes in the Midwest, you've never been to a coast, right? So you go study abroad somewhere else in the world and you come back and suddenly moving to New York doesn't seem so intimidating, right? Or
Yeah,
moving to California, like, oh yeah, I mean, I've flown across the ocean and, spoken to people whose first language is not English. Surely I can make it in the world in a place where, maybe there's a lot more people, but they do speak English and they are Americans, and that in itself is also a big risk sometimes that I see that students are afraid to take, is to, even in the United States, move around a little bit and kind of see what the US has to offer.
Yeah, and I think that advice of, find the place you want to be and then find the job that kind of gets you there. I kind of wish more students would graduate with that outlook because some of them are so laser focused on I need this specific job. And sometimes that's beyond your control. Like you may be a
Yeah.
downtime for that industry, or you can't find that job, or you don't quite have everything you need. So, the proximity thing, that's true not only worldwide, but here as well. If you want to be in a different city or a different part of the US, like go and find what you can find and make your opportunities from that. I think sometimes that would open more doors for students than they let be open for them when they graduate because they're on such, they have tunnel vision sometimes. They've pursued a specific degree for 4 years. They want to do that. And I respect that, but it's also how many of us adults don't work in our degree area. I was a broadcasting major and this is as close to radio as I get these days. So, your opportunities come where you create them. So I think that proximity effect is true everywhere. So that's good advice for all students. So,
Yeah. With that idea of like I have to have this career, students often are concerned about the time it would
mhm.
take. So I can't. So let's stick with study abroad. So hey, you could do that. Oh well, that'll add a semester to my. I need to get done in 4 years or something. It's like, well, you know, with 12 to 14 weeks extra to get the degree, and because you went there, you got exposed and networked and know that there's this job. Would you rather have 14 extra weeks in the span of your life in a fulfilling career or job, or would you rather get that degree and get into this thing that you don't know about and it may or may not work out for you? Like seeing what it looks like and how it is in the world out there. So time and money, I understand that's a major concern that should be but our job is to like, well, let's talk through, let's just talk about options and trade-offs for doing this versus that.
Fair. I was on the 5-year plan personally.
Same.
I talk about that often. 5-year
Mhm.
plan, and I've gotten multiple degrees as an adult. There's always a plan in your mind to like make the best use of your time, and sometimes that, we whittle it down too much, and experiencing other ways of being doesn't seem like a priority when in fact, I mean, especially as a young person, when you haven't had that expanded viewpoint, man, that's an investment that is going to pay you back dividends. I wish like maybe that's kind of the point here is that you kind of have to think about that as an investment in your own learning. And it doesn't have to be academic learning. It's going somewhere and struggling with not being able to speak the language perfectly. But communication is not about speaking the language perfectly. I mean, we've had a podcast for 6 years or whatever at this point, and I screwed up every single episode, right, in my own native language. So communication is beyond that. But
Mhm.
man, what an investment. Like, let people think about that in terms of investing in their lives.
Just a thing I do in the classroom too is like, so why are you here? Like just to ground people. There's certain points in a semester, a student's semester. Oh, I have all these assignments coming due or all these exams, and you get so focused on that one thing. It's like, all right, what's the bigger picture here? Let's step
Mhm.
back. Like, why are you putting yourself through all this time and stress and investing money? Because yeah, it's an investment.
It is
Hopefully,
investment.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Tell
wish more
us,
students
oh,
would focus on that journey and not the destination. Like so many are like, the degree completion's the destination they focus on and they lose the journey, you meeting people from all over the world and learning things in different subjects. And it's like the journey is more valuable than the piece of paper at the end in a lot of cases, but they
It
don't see it
is.
that way until it's over.
I know. Yeah, I know. And having been there, I get it.
Yeah.
So,
tell me what your students are learning at this point in the semester. What classes are you teaching and what are you teaching
yeah.
about?
So again, I'm in the little international area over here, and I have an Africa class. So it counts for a philosophy and humanities class. And the thing that we're talking about right now is looking at uh, agricultural societies in Africa and farming practices. We're looking at foreign aid. That's a USAID is in the news at the moment. I have quite a few ag majors in that class.
Hmm.
So that class is being crafted to what's kind of going across people's social media feeds, plus the type of student that I have in the room. So that's those agricultural majors in the classroom, it's been fun. They're like, oh yeah, I guess, farming happens a lot of places. And you doing it with a hoe in this subsistence environment, or doing it on a commercial scale, kind of like what I do. I didn't realize that happened over there. So there's that. I teach an international relations class, and with regard to that, it has a conflict resolution component to it. So some of these students, I want them to go out into the world not to cause conflict, but to help to resolve it. So we're looking at the Russian-Ukrainian conflict right now and discussing how what happens in that part of the world affects so many others. So Ukraine being a breadbasket and exporting a lot of grain, if the Russians don't allow that grain to get out to the world market, your prices at Hy-Vee go up. Even if you're not buying Ukraine grain directly, it still affects you here. So trying to connect those larger geopolitical events to how it affects not only you in Maryville, Missouri, but others around the world. So they're broken into teams, and they are working on the various dynamics of that conflict with regard to food and fuel. There's a comparative politics class that I'll be teaching for the second block, and it's entirely online. It's our professional based online class. And so I'll have to virtually do what I'm aspiring to do in the classroom with those two classes that I just mentioned. And then I have an introduction to government class. And that I view that as a very important class. It's like basic civics, like how do you involve yourself as a citizen? Even if you're an international student, you're still a resident of this community. So participating in student senate, channeling your concerns to faculty senate or to the board of regents. There's various obligations of being a part of something larger than yourself. And so that government class that I teach every semester I really enjoy it, for those reasons too.
What advice do you have for students? I feel like you've given us students a lot of great advice so far, but we always, especially when we have faculty, we always like to ask for, advice you would give to students, maybe students who are thinking about, studying abroad or joining in your major area, like any kind of words of wisdom you can share for them.
That big thing is to get people to recognize everyone has a story and try to engage people to share whatever they're willing to share about that story. So I model that a lot of times. If I don't know the student that's in the room, just making small talk for class, like, hey, what's your story? Well, what do you mean? And it's usually like my name and my major. I'm like, nah, like, what's something you'd want to share with me that's not your name or major? Like, and so that's one piece of advice is like, I've had so many great opportunities and connections made by just asking that open-ended question, like, what's your story? So I would encourage, that'd be my advice. Like, as you meet people, whether it's because you have to, I have this appointment, I have to talk to so-and-so, well, just kind of interject at some point. Hey, what's your story? Like humanize and connect. So,
And it's
we got a
short,
lot
it's
of
easy to remember.
Mhm.
Oh, brilliant.
yeah. So that's my piece of advice. Now, as far as traveling, the best piece of advice I got before I left the U.S., having not done that before, was travel as much as you can and be yourself. And that seems kind of self-evident, like be yourself, but I don't know. It's like sometimes if you're in a different environment, a different context, you feel obliged to maybe try to not stand out as much or whatever. But you can only be yourself, and I think people sense when you're sincere and genuine. So and that tends to open up for a positive interaction as well. So
I got
I know
one
that's
more
kind of I know
comment.
that's kind of fortune cookie like, but
No, that was good. That's really good
But
advice.
but those two things build off of each other because when
Mhm.
you're asking someone like, "Hey, what's your story?" and giving them a chance to share, part of the other half is you're building your own story by traveling, right? And so when someone asks you, "Hey, what's your story?" and you're just like, my name's Brian. I'm from the small town in Kansas, right? You have so much more of a story to share, and traveling helps, right? You like, "Oh, I'll just tell you the story about how I went on this trip," right? And it gives you something to contribute to the world as well in terms of your own story, right?
Yeah, well, listening to you talk about the roundabouts and just the massive humanity going around, yeah, that like I appreciate the picture you painted in my mind, but then I can also see that see a version of that story somewhere else, and it takes me back to that other place, and that's kind of a good feeling on a
And
Friday
that's
afternoon.
connection. Yeah,
Definitely.
that's if I had to, like, anybody who's listening or watching, like, that's kind of the essence of that communicative human connection. Again, if you're going there, everybody's in the swirling mass of humanity and is experiencing it. Maybe they don't speak English, right? And but I'm experiencing it with them. And so again, those stories are what connect us together as people, no matter where you are, no matter what language you're speaking.
Travis, what's your story?
I don't know. Yeah, but we appreciate you sharing yours with us. That was fantastic. So we definitely thank you for your time today, and thanks for helping us out with the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Yes, thank you. This has been awesome.
All
All
right.
right.
Well, that will do it for the episode of Behind the Bearcat, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to give us a thumbs up below. That helps out. Also, if you've not done so yet, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Also, we'd love to connect with you on social media. You can find Behind the Bearcat on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Plus, the audio podcast comes out on Fridays on all the major podcast platforms. Thanks again for watching Behind the Bearcat, and as always, we'll talk to you next time.